It's hard to imagine a life without the multitude of food options today. All of this comes from the combination of advancing agriculture combined with worldwide transport networks to provide food for the world. Truly, the advent of farming has been pivotal for our prosperity, yet the cracks are starting to show. And I'm telling you, things are not looking good. But today's focus is not on water pollution from fertilizer leaching or reservoir damage for cash crops. Today, we shift our focus to the invisible, the firmament over our heads, and how our agriculture practices wound the sky. In 2018, Our World in Data reported that 26% of all greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs, are sourced from agricultural practices. These include the usual culprits: carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane, nitrous oxide, and particulate matter. You may wonder, how does growing plants cause worse pollution? Shouldn't plants be taking carbon out of the atmosphere? It would, if it were planted naturally and not harvested for our consumption. The thing about the modern agricultural scene is that we heavily optimize for yield by any means necessary. Pesticide spraying, fertilizers, monoculture. All this never leaves the earth to rest after a harvest. Also, funnily enough, livestock accounts for about 80% of agricultural land use, despite only accounting for 20% of the world's accessible calorie supply. All of this still needs to be tended to, by the way, sown, watered, harvested, and shipped globally. Today's machines that do these tasks release these GHGs during operation. Oh, and don't get me started on the slash and burn practices done in expansionist mindset countries to reclaim forests for farmland in the first place. Either way, they all add up and pollute our atmosphere, causing horrible side effects to life on Earth, such as unpredictable weather and rainfall, global warming, respiratory issues, and worse still, food disruptions caused by ecosystem breakdown from the emission and deposition of these airborne assassins. Let's dive deeper into the specifics with a few case studies as I take you along a little journey to show the severity of the problems at hand. Our first stop, Vietnam. It's said that the Mekong Delta is Vietnam's granary, given that it produced about 24 million tons of rice last year, 50% of all rice ever grown in Vietnam. 90% of all Vietnamese rice exports come from here. Naturally, today, with so much farmland, Vietnam utilizes heavy machinery and vehicles to tend to the land. This paper by Nguyen Huy Bic and Nguyen Thang Nhi investigates greenhouse gases emitted from these iron buffaloes. The paper splits the emissions into two: direct causes from machine operations and indirect causes from machine manufacturing and transport. By analyzing the machines used per hectare of land and converting it to fuel used in liters per hectare, a rough CO2 estimate can be found. It was found that in total, all machinery accounts for emissions of about 733,000 tons of CO2 per year, equivalent to burning more than 300,000 tons of coal every year. According to the report, the CO2 primarily came from machines used during soil tillage, irrigation, and paddy harvesting, while machines such as fertilizer and pesticide applicators had a less significant effect. Of course, this doesn't account for how the spraying of these aerosolized chemicals introduces PM pollution, or how fertilizer sprays release nitrous oxide due to bacteria in the soil oxidizing it. But this case study shows how much pollution is being generated despite focusing on only one specific pollution source. But if that's carbon dioxide from machines alone, what about other greenhouse gases? For that, we turn our gaze to the second location of our case study, Sri Lanka. The Mahaweli System H, located off Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, is the region that produces the most rice in the country. about 17% of the total. A third of the land in this region is agricultural land, and agricultural practices here contribute to a fifth of all greenhouse gases released by the country. Other than rice, this area is also known for rearing livestock, especially cattle, treasured for their dairy products. This paper by Hemali Ratnayake and Takeshi Mizunoya investigates and tallies the output of 3 different GHGs, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide from agricultural activities here, based on reports from government bodies such as the Sri Lanka's Department of Agriculture. It was found that a net of 162,000 tons of CO2 alone was released yearly by the region. A little less worrying than the previous case study back in Vietnam, but remember, this is only the CO2. If we combine this metric with the other sources of CH4, CO2 and N2O emissions from the paddy fields, livestock and soil amendments, an additional 195,000 tons of CO2 equivalents are released yearly. Methane made up almost half of all GHGs emitted, followed by N2O at 32%. Perhaps the most frightening part is how unnoticeable the emission of these gases are from our perspective down below. I believe we are missing a final pollutant, particulate matter, or PMs, specifically PM2.5 and PM10 from fertilizer and pesticide aerosols. These light particles drift freely in the air and deposit themselves onto surfaces, be it walls, floors, or scarier still, the airways in our lungs. For this, we will travel to our final destination, Taiwan. Tainan City, it was once the capital where Taiwan was under Portuguese rule. Today, it is a scenic and historic city, which also boasts an agricultural sector, primarily producing fruits such as jujube, mangoes, and pineapples. However, our focus will be towards cereal crops such as corn and rice, grown in the more rural areas. This paper by Tian Chengzhong et al. Investigates the deposition of PMs from the cultivation of both of these crops near elementary schools. It was discovered that the PM10 concentrations outdoors could reach up to 45 micrograms per cubic meter, while PM2.5 concentrations up to 20 micrograms per cubic meter. Indoors, PM10 could reach up to 35 micrograms per cubic meter, while PM2.5 up to 15 micrograms per cubic meter. Now, a single microgram seems small, a millionth of a gram in fact. But it must also be noted that the WHO underlines an annual average of merely 5 micrograms per cubic meter as healthy. This means that people living in the vicinity, including these students, are receiving almost 10 times the recommended annual amount per crop cycle. Even more worrying how the paper also mentions about traces of heavy metals such as arsenic, cadmium, and lead among these particulate matters. Oh, what a grim journey. Still, there is hope. Efforts to change the way we farm have been well underway as many countries work toward achieving net zero emissions. I have yet to mention the elephant in the room, which is open burning practices. In the Mekong Delta area, paddy stalks burned in this region contribute to about 30 million tons of CO2 annually, as well as contribute to tons of particulate matter generation. Thankfully, straw baling machines reduce the total amount of straw burnt by up to 20%. Still a long way to go, but that is a promising amount. Next, repurposing manure and other byproducts as fertilizer helps to reduce the dependency of external fertilizers for soil amendments, and therefore reducing net nitrogen emissions from agriculture. Finally, utilizing smarter tillage practices alongside crop rotations allow the soil to rest and also cut the dependency of soil amendments. These systems have been practiced by traditional farming communities, and it should be brought back to the forefront in modern cultivation techniques in the name of a clearer sky. Technology has leapt bounds in the name of ensuring food security of humans on Earth. However, it is time to conduct check and balance on our current practices to make them more sustainable. Reducing air pollutants sourced from agriculture is a necessary step in growing cleaner and healthier food for mankind. We are a part of nature, and we should work in tandem with it, not against it.